Engagement Manager here at America Makes, and I will be your host for today's TRX webinar presentation. One note before we kick things off, opportunity for questions and answers. There is both a Q&A section that will work for some people and then others it will not, but you are welcome to either use the chat or come off mute at the end and ask your questions directly to the presenters. Now that we have established that, I would like to introduce our presentation for today. I mentioned it a second ago, but the topic for today is unlocking funding, strategies for financially empowering innovation centers, entrepreneurship programs, and makerspaces. Educational innovation centers and entrepreneurship programs and Fab Labs are all crucial for fostering creativity and technological advancement. However, they often face significant financial challenges, many of which will be addressed in today's webinar. I'd like to introduce our first presenter today, who is Renee Oscar Arico with 3D Control Systems, the innovators behind the 3D Printer OS software. Oscar is a business development leader with 10 years of experience with a specific expertise in the startup environment. He is a jack of many trades, including finance, customer service, sales, product development, and marketing. He regularly can be found attending conferences around the world, promoting the business, and continuing to learn as he goes. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Oscar to go ahead and get us started. Oscar, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Zane. So I'm Oscar from 3D Printer OS, and as Zane mentioned, I've been doing this for over a decade. And actually, we pioneered this product essentially with Chip Bobbert about 8 years ago at Duke University. And Chip is a real pioneer of the industry. He's definitely, knows his way around the educational technology, and that's why we talked a little bit more about this, and then we figured that there's a big problem at makerspaces, which is actually getting funding. And I think he's the best guy to actually talk about how we can, tackle that problem. And I'll have him talk a little bit more about himself. And yeah, take it away, Chip.
Great, thank you, Zane, and thank you, Oscar. This is definitely a fun and interesting problem. Maybe not fun for those that are dealing with it day to day, but just to kind of get us off here on a hot start, I thought I'd throw a problem statement up here. This conversation, this actual session that we have going today evolved over the course of about 18 months. We've been having discussions off and on with 3D Control Systems about where we see the market headed. And we've seen this slowing of innovation centers and makerspaces. They're not developing and popping up all over the place the way that they were over the last 10 years. We've sort of hit this plateau, but there also isn't really, we can't make a statement that there's been market saturation with makerspaces, innovation centers, and entrepreneurship centers. Many schools don't have them, or where they do have them, they're just sort of tokenized. They're often offering limited programming. And, I've had an opportunity within my career to enjoy a fellowship role, and in conversations with those that are powering these centers, we're finding that growth is really limited by resources. So thank you to America Makes for allowing us to come in here and maybe have a soft skills side of the discussion. So maybe the only slide that I'm going to read here for you today is just to set the stage for our problem statement that despite their potential as significant transformative tools in education, innovation programs are often under-resourced in comparison to the impact that they are creating. This resource gap is limiting growth, as we said. So let's talk about what some of the solutions are for this. But before we do, let me just explain who I am and why am I qualified to speak to you. I've been in the emerging technology space in education for the last 25 years or so. I started building media programs at UNC Wilmington. I told my kids that there was a day before YouTube, and I was part of that era. I helped get a lot of the educational content that we were producing into our LMS systems and other rich media tools. And that led to a role at Duke University, where I had the fortune of being a program architect that was behind our Innovation Co-Lab, and that was really our makerspace in the innovation ecosystem for the campus at large there. And then from there, I moved into a funding role, into philanthropy, into a donor advised fund in the DC area where I handled our educational portfolio and providing grant dollars. So I've had this kind of journey through my career that's taken me from frontline management to the person who's actually approving grant dollar requests. And my current projects are leading the Construct 3D effort, which is a professional development conference that we offer for those that are managing innovation programs and makerspaces. And my full-time day job is running the Colopy Entrepreneurship Center at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. So that I think I have a unique view into this. Maybe just quickly touching on some housekeeping. I know that Zane touched on some of these points. Who's this presentation for? This is for educational and institutional makerspace managers, innovation center managers without funding experience, innovation centers, I&E centers without funding. But if you are already funded, congratulations, you may get a couple of things out of the strategies that we talk about here. We're going to run this for 30 to 40 minutes. We'll try to keep the talking at you to a low point. There's 3 sections for us. This is going to be preparing for funding, and then we're going to talk about internal and external funding opportunities, and then we'll try to get into some Q&A. What are we not covering today? This is not a magic bullet conversation. Many of the engagements that I have taken in the consulting space, it started with this idea that I would be able to provide folks with a link or some sort of kind of thing that they could just click on or do, and that would lead to dollars falling from the sky. Unfortunately, I don't have that superpower, but I'm going to help hopefully give you some tools that you can use to pursue some of those efforts. Zane touched quickly on questions, easily answered questions. Feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll try to get them in line. If they're extended questions, we'll try to handle those after our discussion. Also, too, I'm going to give you all opportunities to emote. I know that I do the listen and learn thing myself with many of these web sessions. But I'll have some opportunities in there to emote, and feel free to click on something if you can. I do see Zane's hand up, so I'm going to pause for a second there just to let him jump in.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off, but it looks like we're seeing some limited bandwidth. Might suggest taking the camera off to hopefully clarify the sharing of their presentation a little bit.
Okay. Is it better if I turn mine off?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll hit that. All right, perfect. And Zane, are you still able to see all of the sharing there?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. Well, with the housekeeping completed, let's get into some of the thinking around how to create the kind of soft skills necessary for developing. The first thing I'd like to do is sell you all on this mental model that you are a developer. We have really kind of pivoted in this world. We have advancement units at pretty much every institution that's out there, but they are busy people, and they do best when you are able to provide them with some resources and do some of the pre-work. They can't be experts on the things that you do. So when I'm advising and consulting, funding is the number one thing that comes up during engagements. And during those conversations, I often find that the prep work is missing. You know, folks are bringing you in and they're saying, connect us to funders. And I say, okay, well, if I do connect you to a funder, you know, what are you going to tell them? And then that is often met with blank stares. So typically from there, we go into a round of kind of soul searching where we help them develop the portfolio that they need to have those conversations with funders. So I find 3 things in every engagement that are really, you know, problematic. I find that many of the managers of makerspaces, they're unprepared for funding conversations. They're doing a great job managing their groups day to day, but they really don't have the information or the mindset compiled to have those discussions. I find senior leaders often have expectation issues. They hope that they know that these makerspaces or innovation centers are running well and people are generally happy with them. But they don't really have, you know, they don't really understand why the funding isn't coming in to support something. If people like things, generally funding follows, but that doesn't seem to always happen in that world. And I typically find that internal partnerships are not well developed, that often makerspaces, even though they're part of a larger organization or a larger division inside of their school, that they are not often connected with other units that can help and support them. So this is our first chance to emote. If you identify with any of those few things or you disagree with them, feel free to give me a thumbs up, thumbs down if you want to put a social element to this conversation. The good news here is that these are solvable things, and we can help you resolve those going forward. Excellent. I see a couple of thumbs up there, so at least some agreement here in the crowd with that. Firstly, let's start on our key partnerships. So our internal partnerships are often the things that are missing. This is the first issue that I look at. I typically get off the plane, and I meet with folks and I say, well, who are you working with in your institution? And I hear, no one. We are alone in this and we really need help. And typically from there, we are trying to build meetings and whatnot. And the groups that I typically start with that I find most important are the advancement and or foundation. So if you know your advancement and foundation folks at your institution, you're probably off to a good start, but many folks that I meet along the way here have not actually engaged with them. So most schools will have a foundation. If you haven't actually worked on the legal side of nonprofits before, foundations can really be thought of as the bank for the nonprofit world. So this is a place where funds come in and it becomes this holding vessel for dollars. Advancement typically refers to the units and developers that are out there in the field working and building relationships with those that are outside of the institution to help bring those dollars in. And it might surprise you, but oftentimes, I run into advancement folks and they really don't know much about their makerspaces. They might know that they have one. They don't really know what goes on there. And that's a problem because we're not really giving them the tools to sell stuff down the road. Institutional effectiveness. This is the name that I often find with groups at various institutions. They keep the metrics. They are the keeper of the stats. They are where the scorecards live with the organization. Oftentimes, there are maybe just a shout out for a sponsor here with 3D control systems. With 3D Printer OS was a great tool that actually kept track of all of the various touches that we have. So we were able to get great stats. But what do you do with those? Just knowing how many prints you have isn't necessarily useful. But connecting back through a relationship to your institutional effectiveness or similarly named unit can really help you make sense of those. This can tell you if one major is using the printers or other devices more than somebody else. This can help with costing conversations, or if you have problems of underrepresentation, those can show up there. This will help you generate the statistics necessary for the funding conversations down the road. Marketing and communications. First thing I do when I have an engagement is I look toward the marketing material, what's out there. Often makerspaces have, an Instagram account. They're posting, once or twice a week about some of the cool stuff that they do, but they really don't make it into the university's news cycle or the university's official communications and headlines. So, if you have an opportunity to build a relationship with your marketing and communications unit, that is an excellent thing to do. They always have inches that they need to fill in their columns and websites and blogs. And oftentimes you have cool things that you're doing inside of your facilities. So it seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement to make there if you can just supply them with some of the things that can happen. This helps for fundability as well, because anybody that might be interested in funding your programs is definitely going to be Googling about you to see what happens. Research support. So you will want to make, if your institution engages in research, you're going to want to make connections with those in this space. I often find that those are not well built out systems. So if typically you are going to struggle if you are applying for grants. Most of the folks that are managing makerspaces are probably not the kind of people that are going to be able to serve as the principal for a grant. Working with your researchers, typically the grants are going back to a subject matter or subject inside of a research topic. So you building the relationship with them allows them to be the principal and allows you to serve by providing your services back to them. Centers for Teaching Excellence, this is the name you often find with your instructional designers or your instructional technologists. If you're not working with them on campus, this is a great relationship to build. Typically, these are the people that are going to help you connect back to the academic core. Most of the faculty members on campus that are building out programming and are thinking about how to put technology or new ideas into their courses, they're going to stop at these centers for teaching excellence, and they're going to get help and assistance there. So build relationships with them so that they know what you're doing and what services you can provide back. Business infrastructure and IT units, if you are thinking about potentially charging fees for your services, if you're going to recover costs for 3D printed materials, if you're going to cover costs for laser cutting materials, having those relationships with your business unit will help you coordinate chargebacks. Typically, when I walk into areas, there's very little in the way of connection to makerspaces back to their business entities. Those are an important thing to build out. Your infrastructure, your space resources, those are things that working with your facilities folks are great relationships to have as well. There is the word space in makerspace. You need room to make things work, and oftentimes doing things within those rooms has a cost to it, and good relationships with your facilities department will help support that. There are also a lot of grants and opportunities around equity and inclusion. I know that that is an important problem for everybody on this call. We all want to solve those issues. And the good news is there are a lot of dollars that are out there in the philanthropy ecosystem to help us support those missions. So having a relationship with your Center for Equity and Inclusion will help you quite a bit down the road. So let's talk a little bit about what I call the identity crisis. Uh, Oftentimes I find that makerspaces are islands of misfit toys. You know, they were built by the first department at their institution that really wanted something like that. And they were thrown together and they gobbled up a bunch of missions. Makerspace leaders and managers tend to be very helpful people within their institution. They want to jump in, they want to provide support and utility and value. So they take on a lot of these different roles, but along the way, there's very little documentation as to how they got there. When you start talking to the staff members that support it, the managers themselves, you'll find that they don't really know what they are actually tasked with in terms of a mission, just because they've evolved through scope creep. The partnerships themselves aren't really evident. Centers end up being transactional as a result. And that often creates a value problem in the minds of your users. Senior leaders, they love makerspaces and they love innovation programs, but they don't always understand what we do. They don't understand how the cost structure works. One point in my own career, I actually got in a little bit of trouble for purchasing pallets of plywood to help support our makerspace program for the laser cutters and CNC machines. And nobody could figure out why I was buying piles of plywood. And it was just one of those leadership education moments, an example from my time. And as a result, though, of not understanding that cost structure, folks don't often understand how to activate revenue streams and how to generate those revenue streams. And that is, I think, the centerpiece of this conversation. So we want to resolve that identity crisis. And one of the ways that we really do that is just by asking ourselves hard questions. You know, what do we do? Why are we here? What is the value that we bring? And not just asking ourselves that as leaders, but asking ourselves that as people that will be talking to a funder, because the funders are going to ask you this. Their analysts are going to come up with lists of questions that will definitely be hard for you to answer if you're not well prepared for that conversation. So one thing I really like to do, and if you've had a business class or business background, you've probably seen a document like this before. It's a little bit of a modified version of a lean canvas. I think the 3D Printer OS folks were nice enough to create us a short link to a template that you could use. So if you are interested in doing this exercise with your department, please do click on that link and copy it down. That will take you out to a whiteboarding tool called Lucid Chart. There are plenty of other whiteboarding tools out there that you could use, like Miro and whatnot. I think Teams even has that functionality now, but feel free to take that, bookmark that, and use that template as kind of open information. And what we do here, what you're looking at, is a tool often used by startups to help explain what they do, how they're going to participate in the market. And again, we've tweaked this just to kind of treat that market as an internal one within the university. But I have everybody make Post-its and cards, and we fill out this template, this thing to help us understand, what it is that we actually do, what solution we actually provide. So maybe just walking through it here. I like to start folks in the value proposition space. What do you do? What is the value that you provide back to your university or your institution? And oftentimes the best way to answer that is just asking ourselves, what happens if you go away? Let's say that you get a new president of your institution and they decide to delete the makerspace. What happens? Who suffers? Who feels pain? And in what ways? And that is the opposite of that answer typically will help you explain what value people will see in you. From there, I encourage you to think about the problem. What problem are we solving is always a question first and foremost on everybody's mind. What do we provide? Do we provide services for academia? Do we provide services for the research institute component of our school? Do we provide workforce development? Do we provide community education? What are the problems that we're working on? And then, of course, what are the solutions to those problems? What are the things that we're doing that lead to that value creation process? And again, you can create various Post-its there and just start to populate that out. And usually what I do is I assign this as homework to the various people that are the individual contributors in labs, the managers of those programs, and then to the leaders that oversee these as well. What's really interesting is you start to see a variety of different answers that come back that can help inform us in later conversations. From there, that really describes the service side of the program, but let's talk about our users for a second. What do they see? What advantage does our program have? What is our competitive advantage? And typically when you say competitive advantage, you're saying, well, what is, that implies that there's a market and a university as a cooperative space. Not always. If you are 3D printing things in your lab, that's great, but why would somebody use your lab instead of proto labs? Oftentimes, larger institutions will have 2, 3, 4, 5 makerspaces. Why would somebody come to your makerspace and not another one on campus? Who are the customer segments that you serve? Everyone will say they're faculty, students, and staff, but what types of students? Is it the art students? Is it the engineering students? Do you have department-specific requirements that you have to do? Are you serving the whole campus as a general audience? Are you serving higher fidelity needs that researchers might have? And those are often very important questions to have to actually know your audience, because everybody assumes that it's just everyone. Ask yourself, how will you engage with your students? What's the internal channel? How are you going to reach them? Are they coming to your labs because they are forced to, as being part of a class in some way? Or are they coming there because they want to just doodle on something, an idea that they had? Are they coming there for a different reason? How are you reaching them? How are you reaching your faculty? And again, this soul searching will help inform those conversations, because these are questions that funders are going to ask you, and this is the line of thinking that they'll have. For your leaders, this is really interesting, the cost structure and revenue streams. So moving down to the bottom of the chart here, where we talk about what is our cost drivers, what is our labor factor? Are you accounting for labor as a manager? Do you have to, or are these just staff positions with labor sourced elsewhere, labor costs fulfilled elsewhere? Do you have to pay for your infrastructure? Do you have to pay for facilities fees? Do you have to pay for your equipment? What are the things that are causing you to need dollars? And then, of course, we move over to our revenue streams, which is the topic of today's conversation. How are we going to generate those dollars? Is it going to be an annual budget request? Are we going to sink dollars? Are we going to hope to engage with philanthropists? What do we do here? So I find that using this tool is very, very useful and powerful, and this helps us develop our document that we will need to share with funders, and helps us kind of pre-answer some of the questions that they're going to have. So if any of that was useful for you, there's a good chance for an emote. Love to see if this is one of those things that we could incorporate into internal conversations that you have, or if this is just something that's an exercise the consultant assigned. So anything that you have there will help us. We had a couple of thumbs up and applauses. Thank you for that. I did purposely skip over one thing, the key metrics there. I do have this belief that you shouldn't own your metrics. If you are operating one of these programs, this is where some of those relationships with your institutional effectiveness or similarly named unit could provide you. If you are operating lab management software tools, this is where you can tie those back in so that you are getting real-time statistics that will help inform your portfolios. So let's talk about developing a portfolio now. So this is the last kind of segment that we have in our exercise. But to move into the portfolio, I'm going to ask to change the name a little bit. I usually start with calling it a portfolio. The real name that we use for that is a prospectus, but I find that everybody knows what a portfolio is. The mental model to use for your prospectus is that I'm going to ask you to make a resume that describes what your program does. And you can make multiple versions of it. I would imagine that everybody on this call has had a chance to apply for a job at some point. So you've had to make a list of features about yourself, and you have had to make a list of things that you do and that you do well and that give you a comparative advantage. And you've probably made multiple versions of that. For various companies, you've probably tailored your resume. So this process is very similar to that when you think about that. Include what you've learned during that exercise that I just suggested. Include what you learned when you built the canvas out. You will have, again, all of those insights that you have collected from your individual contributors, your frontline managers, and your senior leaders will all come together and hopefully create points of realization, as well as your key metrics. Hopefully you can do those live. Oftentimes, if you're using lab management tools, you are able to pull a lot of that information just out of that into Tableau and then pivot it against other institutional information sources to give you really unique things that you can show funders. You want to include a limited qualitative information section. There's always the temptation there to really go wild on all of the different projects that you're happening. But again, this is where the relationship with your marketing and communications department really comes to bear. Add a section there that links out to the various news sources that you've created, the various blog posts that you've worked with. This will help. Those links will show much more profoundly to a funder than what you just enumerating it inside of your resume is. So think of it in a way kind of like a CV as opposed to a resume where you're linking out to your publications. Involve your leadership in this process too. Again, continue and often engage with them as much as you can. Have them at least read this. This will help put in the back of their mind and start to solve that problem about why do I have a makerspace and what I'm doing there. Unlike a resume or a CV, also include what you aren't doing well. Include everything that you are bad at. And the reason for that is that's where the opportunity exists. If you are working on, say, an example where you want to improve upon issues of underrepresentation in your lab, you need to first say that we have that problem and we want to solve that. Again, the conversations with the funders that you're going to engage with are going to be treating them as a partner in your problem. You're not selling to them. You're telling them that you have a problem and that you need their help. And that is a better way to do it than trying to create it as kind of a used car sales situation. Have a menu of those problems. I would imagine that you all have more than one issue that you're facing. Feel free to put a list of things in there that you're working on if you do have a single document as opposed to a tailored document. And I'll also give you the advice of not focusing on capital equipment requests. It's easy to do that. I'm a maker myself, and my shop is full of equipment that has no business belonging in a residentially zoned house. So I love my stuff, but if you start telling them about why you need a 1,000-watt laser cutter, they aren't going to get it. Instead, focus on what that equipment will do, how that will support and help your program. So once you have this prospectus done, think again, we're thinking of the prospectus very much like a resume. Now you got to get ready to pitch that prospectus. And to do that, so think of this again like a resume, and the pitch, think of this as the job interview itself. So when you are meeting with a funder, they're going to ask you for that prospectus or similarly named document up front. Their analysts are going to look at it. They're going to kind of pick through it to figure out what they don't like and what they do like about it. And then they're going to offer advice and recommendations before you ever have that meeting. So once you make it to the pitch, you can know that they are interested in this. Have a short deck ready. Match that with your prospectus. Visual overlays are helpful, but use them sparingly. You're going to want to move quickly. Your pitch should be less than 5 minutes. Typically, the meetings that you're going to get with funders are going to be, especially in the philanthropic space, are going to be less than 30 minutes long. And you're going to want to just have all of your ducks in a row. Funders love stats. It's just like a venture capitalist funding a startup. They aren't going to fund something that they don't like the data that they see. They're going to ask to see your data room. So be prepared to present that. And again, that's where lab management tools that generate statistics and that work with your institutional effectiveness unit can really kind of support this and help this. Be prepared to travel as well. I know we live in a Zoom world now, and I know Zoom is great for accelerating meetings and conversations, but if you have the opportunity to do a pitch in person as opposed to through Zoom, I found that to be much more effective. Also be prepared. Oftentimes funders are supporting different conferences and different events. Look for them there. Seek them out there. Try to have conversations and coffees with them there so that you can learn about their organization and what their missions are, and that will help you tailor your presentations. So with that, let's talk about internal funding. So where are we going to get our money from? So this is that bottom corner of our canvas. So that internal funding has to be solved. And I'm guessing that most of you here are probably thinking, well, I am here because I asked for internal funding and that didn't happen. So now I'm trying to find funding elsewhere. So, this isn't a useful section for me, but in a way it's extremely useful for everybody. Because external funders generally aren't going to fund something that they feel is not well supported internally. One of the questions that funders are going to ask or try to figure out is, what is the skin in the game that the institution has? If they're asking me to put $1 million into a program, what are they putting into it? If they're putting $0 into this does not feel like an attractive investment for me to make. If they are putting matching dollars into this, then that feels like a much more attractive thing. So you really do have to explore all internal funding options first and be prepared to explain what you have done on that internal funding pursuit. So the first thing too, the way that these sort of break down, and just throwing the lingo for leadership type conversations, you can fund your department through a budget. Annual budget requests, ABRs, are usually the way that that's done and increased. So you can certainly go to your leaders and ask for dollars. I would imagine we all know how that would probably go. Other areas to explore are performance-based funding. If you are showing that you are serving a large headcount of students, or there are performance-based funding funds within your school, you can certainly explore that with your leadership. That's a great place to go. Have answers again for your external funders about exploring these things. Strategic initiative funds. A common thing that I find when engaging with frontline managers at makerspaces, hand them their institution strategic documents, and oftentimes it's the first time they've seen them. Definitely dig through your institute. Every institution is going to have a strategic initiative type effort. They are going to have a strategy document that they are working from. Work to understand the signals that come from that. How does what you're doing in your makerspace align with what they're hoping to see? Oftentimes, there are funds available for strategic initiatives or initiatives that are aligned with what they are hoping that document will produce. Presidents or provost funds, those are common places to find stuff. These tend to be special initiatives, again, tied back to special initiative funds. They can also support pilot programs as well. This is a great place to look at for one-time monies. Provosts in particular are really good at hiding money in the couch cushions. So if you can develop and build a relationship with your leadership that hopefully extends to the provost's office, you can potentially, through that constant marketing and communication effort, show your value to that person. Hopefully they'll help support this. Fee for service is a little bit of a sort of work for what you need stuff. Be careful of student fees. I'm going to look at this real quick here, Skip. Be careful of student fees. University-wide student fees are very difficult to enact. That is absolutely true. For course-related student fees, many schools will allow direct supplies only. No staff, no capital equipment. That is absolutely 100% correct. It will be very difficult to fully power your program through student fees, but nevertheless, they are a source of funding that you need to consider when doing things. Oftentimes, if I am looking at an innovation program or a makerspace and I see a school or a funder sees a school has a technology fee, I'm going to need to understand why that technology fee isn't helping to support your program. So there's as much of using this as avenues for funding, but also having answers to that skin in the game question that we need to always keep in the back of our minds. Fee for service things. So you can, where if you are tying into your research entities or your school does have a research effort, operating as a core facility will help you charge back to various grants. Also, of course, working with researchers, they can earmark dollars inside of their grant requests to be spent with your programs. So this can help in the buying of equipment. I had a lot of keep your change type equipment purchases, what I call them. But we would purchase a large piece of equipment to help support a grant. Well, the grant is done and the equipment has to go somewhere, so why not stay with our lab and continue to benefit the campus in some way. Partnership with academic programs can be a great way to do this too. Again, if there are programs, especially project-based learning programs and active learning programs that often provide dollars to the student teams, those dollars are typically spent to fabricate things, build things, and on various other innovation supplies. It's a great way to kind of keep those dollars internal to the university and at least help offset some of your operating costs. And again, as we've discussed with student fees, many campuses are charging fees for various things. Obviously, tuition goes back to supporting the academic core. So we want to try to create that relationship with the academic core and then potentially develop chargeback mechanisms to that. And of course, there are fees for various student life activities and for various and occasionally for technology support. So we want to see and explore what's happening there and at least have answers for that. Generally speaking, just the last notes on internal funding and just through the lens of a funder, embrace creative destruction. This is an age-old economic term that's kind of making its way in circles again, but look for things that are going out of vogue. So we were able to fund our labs at Duke by looking at our computer labs. It had turned out that no one was really using computer labs anymore. Everybody showed up with laptops to school. So by eliminating our computer labs, that freed budget dollars to help support our Makerspace and Innovation Center activities. Reorgs are your friend. Everybody always takes a deep breath. They think of reorgs like musical chairs, and that's not a good way to think about it. More think about who you're going to sit next to once the reorg happens. Are there new partners that you could work with? Look for duplication of service issues. Oftentimes, again, I've been to schools where there's quite a few makerspaces that are floating around. Why do you have 3 or 4 makerspaces? The first thing I'm going to think of as a funder is if you are asking me to help fund and support your innovation program, but I see your university has 3 innovation programs, that's going to worry me a little bit. It's going to kind of sing inefficiency to me. So at least have an understanding of how that's working and what that ecosystem looks like there. Develop collaborative partnerships for service provision. So this is where we start to get into the external funding space. But oftentimes, funding foundations and mission-driven philanthropies will partner with various nonprofits. So think through who your nonprofit partners and who your community partners are. So with that, let's jump into the external funding section here. I want to really thank MakerBot here too. I'm going to provide these links at the end, and this is screenshot friendly. They have been compiling a great list. I think they have 40 or so people that they recommend looking at first for external grants. And then there's another link down here with Spark Fund who offers something similar. And the last thing that I want to do as I talk about duplication of services is duplicate their efforts in any way. They seem to publish this guide every year, and if they enjoy owning that and putting the effort into that, that is a great place to stop and look for, at least develop a list of places to get started. External funding. So external funding falls into a couple of categories really in our last couple of slides here. So we have, you can certainly fund through grants and grants, NSF, NIH, DOE. Those are all places that people think of to start. Those are a little harder for innovation centers, to be honest with you. They also tend to have a much longer runway. Typically, if you're finding out about those, usually the deadline and the award is at least a year away. It's very intensive to complete the documents to pursue those. I don't want to discourage anybody from exploring those. It is one avenue to seek, but typically you're also going to have to have partnerships with those on the faculty side. So if you do not have a faculty member that is operating your department, you're probably going to want to think through those academic and research partnerships as you're pursuing those as well. State government grants are interesting to think through as well. Typically, they are not as researchy focused. They are more of a business development, community development type effort. They want to increase their tax base. They want more businesses in their area. They want more people that are providing community services, those kind of things. Oftentimes, those are much more accessible for makerspaces, especially if you are a public university and are operating through state dollars already. You often have a community mission inside of what you do, or a business development mission inside of that. So look for areas inside of your university. SBTDCs are a good place to start. Small Business Technology Development Centers are often places that can provide help and support with that. They kind of end up with one leg in the school and one leg in the community. Private philanthropy is the place where I think that you may have the most benefit there. Thank you, Skip. That's a good list if everybody wants to mark that. So private philanthropy is, again, a good place to start. So alumni giving is an obvious place to go. That usually ends up in the form of micro giving, all the way out to those that have seen a good level of success in life, that are what we call high net worth individuals, those folks that can make larger gifts to help support things. The alumni giving is useful if you can tie that back to annual campaigns. And again, this is where your relationships with your advancement teams are so important. They're able, if people are having good experiences over time, that is something that can provide micro support for your unit. Private foundations and mission-driven philanthropy are also great places to look as well. So mission-driven philanthropy is a term that many are familiar with. Most large foundations, they have some kind of stated goal. They're working on a big, hairy problem. They want to, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, famously, they wanted to provide mosquito nets to a large portion of the population in Africa. So it was a very simple goal. It was something to think about. So if you're a makerspace that is able to support textile manufacturing, you could think of that as a great place to potentially go and seek funding. But the important part, and what I want to drive there, is that you want to understand the mission of that private foundation. What is the reason that they exist? What is the reason that they are operating the way that they do? Look for the signals from them, and then tailor your prospectus to create that proposal. Nonprofit partnerships. Again, partnering with groups like Jobs for the Future and other organizations like that. If you have a workforce development mission in what you do, partnering with them, who are groups that are already receiving dollar amounts and already have relationships with foundations, can be a great way to do this. Though they don't operate as a foundation themselves, they are able to potentially create connections back and forth. You can provide them with capabilities such as research capabilities, or such as innovation center type thinking, or training for industry 4.0 scenarios and those kind of things. That can be a great relationship to kind of form there, and then you can utilize their funding mechanisms as well. And then corporate philanthropy. So our last stop here is within that. So corporate philanthropy is another great way to do this. This is a little bit different than private philanthropy. Oftentimes there's a quid pro quo arrangement that will happen there. They will offer financial support, less for a mission and more for marketing and potential reasons. They may also use this for R&D. I think Shell famously sponsors the X Prize contest, and that's hoping to generate R&D, obviously that could potentially be used in the marketplace there. Many corporations are often engaging in corporate and social responsibility acts. Think through, these are related to potential earlier statements I said about diversity, equity, and inclusion ideas. So look through what they're doing. Many corporations now are focused on improving underrepresentation. So think through how your lab engages with that. Workforce development is another great category and area that's of interest for corporate philanthropy. Obviously, if you are an engineering school and there is a company here who needs to hire engineers, there's a good reason for them to want to support you. And think through what you can potentially offer them. Give them the big table at the career fair, those kind of things. Think through what a relationship could potentially look like. I offered gift in kind down there as just a statement. This is more of a warning. Oftentimes, corporate philanthropists will want to give you a gift in kind. We're seeing this a lot now with Amazon. We're seeing this a lot now with Microsoft, where they are saying, we're not going to give you the dollars, but we will give you access to the Amazon cloud or to Azure, those kind of things. We'll give you a certain number of credits. It's generally better to try to get the dollars from them than it is to try to get whatever product they're selling at a discount. So just last thoughts here. Funding is a relationship building exercise. Don't treat this as transaction. Don't treat this as you're selling them a used car. Develop a relationship with your funder. If your funder says no, that doesn't mean you should never talk to them again. Continue to have the relationship. Find them and seek them out at conferences. Oftentimes, the people that I were funding, it was the third or fourth or fifth ask before something worked out, before they came up with a problem that aligned with our mission. Have a clear understanding of what that funder's missions and goals are. They have KPIs that they need to meet as well. How does what you're asking for help and support with meet with their KPIs? And those are the main keys for this. I do want to just take a moment and thank 3D Control Systems and America Makes. I also want to throw up our email addresses there for anybody that may want to contact us after. Again, this is a volunteer effort on our part. I want nothing more in this world than to see the innovation and makerspace education community succeed and thrive. So if there's anything that I can do to help support that, please don't hesitate to reach out. So with that, we're maybe just a minute or two behind schedule here, but I'd love to open up the floor for Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Chip. I appreciate that. So this is the Q&A time that I was referring to earlier today. So if you would like, I invite you to please come off mute and ask your questions, or feel free to drop them in the chat or the QA section, whichever works for you best. So I'm going to go ahead and actually get us started off here. I have two questions for you, Chip. First is the slides that you presented on today, are they available for those that attended today?
Absolutely. Zane, is it okay if I know that we collected email addresses of folks, if I give you a copy of those slides, or you can distribute that? Wonderful.
Absolutely. Yep. I can
Easy
do that for you. Yeah, we lost a little bit of quality there a few times, so want to make sure we can get that out to share with everybody. And then my second question is is how much does where you fall in your organization as far as org chart goes determine what kind of funding effort opportunities you can go after?
Absolutely. So certainly the further down you are on your org chart, the more difficult that this is going to be, and the more important those relationships with your leadership team is going to be. You're going to have to rely. You're going to be doing what I call a lot of executive advising and executive education. You're going to be training that person to be able to advocate on your behalf. Do what you can to bring that person into your lab, to get them excited about your lab. Understand what they're passionate about. If they are into community support, see if you can bring some of the younger students or whatever into your labs, build that relationship with them so that they can see the importance of what your facility does. I do hold the belief that magic happens every day in makerspaces and innovation centers, and that a lot of that lack of advocacy is just leaders that don't have that opportunity to spend the time in the labs and see the sparkle around the space. So we want to bring them into the lab, have them spend as much time as possible so that they can advocate on our behalf. Simultaneously, obviously, the higher up in any org chart you go, the greater the increase of decision rights that you have for things, the less that you're going to have to do in terms of internal sales for that. But typically, most of what I see, most makerspaces are managed by a program director or a program manager. Typically, I very rarely see anybody at the AVP level or at the chair level that's directly involved in the day-to-day operations of those programs. So typically you're going to find that right in the middle of the org chart, and there is going to be an executive education component to this. Again, involve them in that Canvas exercise. If I have, hopefully I've convinced one or two people to do that. And if you have, get the insight from them. You know, what's important to them? How do they see this lab? And oftentimes you realize in these engagements that folks have just never had that conversation, but respond to their signals.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a follow-up on that. So, you mentioned getting the executive level into the makerspace and kind of getting a little bit more firsthand experience. That can sometimes be a little challenging with the calendars of those folks. Do you have any recommendations or reasons or specific opportunities that might warrant having them visit?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Certainly, we had a lot of success around various what we called special days. So we had programming that we found that we had in our early days at Duke, that we had underrepresentation issues. We wanted to increase women in technology programming, for example. So we had offered nights that focused on their specific demographic, had programming led by them. That got our leadership very excited. They were attending that. They wanted to see those events. We had a lot of our faculty participating in these labs and programming there as well too. Those that were involved in that mentorship and advising process. Everybody that works in education is here for the students. You know, nobody got into education because they wanted to be a billionaire. So take their passion and get that into your space. Use them to communicate back to your leadership. And certainly student advocacy is a big part of this too. If you can convince, if your students are advocating through student governance bodies back to the leaders listen to those. If students are saying this is the best thing on campus, I think at Duke, there was a top 10 list that the students had created. There was the 10 things you must do at Duke before you graduate, and using the makerspace was one of those. So that caught the eye of leaders immediately, and that just showcased the importance that we have. And it goes back to that question I make: what happens if we go away? You know, something else will fill that spot, but it won't be as good.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any questions they want to put in the chat or come off mute for? Give it just a minute. Let's see. Skip said, connect with academic departments for makerspace course labs, some revenue sharing, also the non-credit folks for makerspaces related offerings, more revenue sharing.
That's absolutely a good point, Skip. Finding ways to partner, you know, so that you're sharing true cost of operations back to the units that are using your labs is a way to go. I mean, typically funding is going to come into the departments to use for the purposes of education. Your lab doesn't operate for free. So if you're able to share some of those dollars back so you don't end up in that lab go away scenario, that benefits everybody. So the closer and tighter those relationships with your faculty are, the more likely that is. So that's a wonderful point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Perfect. Thanks, Skip. Anybody else? Give it just a minute there. Alrighty then. I am not seeing anything else come through, and we are about 3 minutes shy of the top of the hour. So, yeah, I want to say thank you, Chip. Thank you, Oscar, for your time today. I appreciate your presentation. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to Chip or Oscar or myself, and I will happily get you connected. I will share the presentation with all of those in attendance for you guys to review. With that, thank you guys, and everybody have a good rest of your day.
And Zane, thank you for hosting us, and Oscar, thank you for sponsoring this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.